I'm really proud to be here with retired Major General Paul Johnson, who, as Daniela said, recently joined Grant Thornton as Senior Strategic Advisor for the Defense and Intelligence Community at Grant Thornton. I get to embarrass you a little bit. You have more than 25 years of senior executive experience in numerous strategic and operational military and staff positions, most recently as Director of Operational Capability Requirements at the U.S. Air Force. You represented the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to the 28-nation military committee at NATO headquarters in Brussels, Belgium, conducting negotiations across an array of geostrategic and capability issues. And you also served as Commander 451st Air Expeditionary Wing and Commander 355th Fighter Wing. During your command tour in Afghanistan, you were responsible for the execution of 6 distinct missions, employing 9 weapon systems and more than 125 aircraft, as well as the morale, welfare, and protection of airmen across 5 locations throughout the country. You completed 4 combat tours, 3 in command positions. I could go on.
Please don't.
Okay, so as much fun as that was, what I really want to talk about, if you can believe it, is the National Defense Strategy, sharpening the American military's competitive edge. Now, give us your overall thoughts on that strategy, having digested it by now.
Yeah, it's ironic. If I were to go back and think as a captain in the Air Force, the last thing I would want to be discussing is the National Defense Strategy. It's kind of ironic that this is what I grew up to do after 30 years in the military.
Now you're on a salary.
Now I'm on a salary. Now I'm on the clock. First of all, kudos to Secretary Mattis for timing the release of the National Defense Strategy on the day that the government shut down. So there's no excuse for anybody not having read the strategy. You had the time available to read the strategy since
That's
we
what you
shut
did
down.
on the shutdown.
That's what I did on the shutdown.
I went to the movies.
What I find interesting about the strategy is, first of all, it has certainly got Secretary Mattis's fingerprints all over it. But if you've been in the Pentagon at all, you know it's a group effort to produce one of those documents. All of OSD staff is involved. All of the services are involved, service secretaries and the service chiefs. So a lot of people are involved in producing the strategy. But again, it is certainly Secretary Mattis's strategy with his fingerprints. What is interesting to me, the senator has touched on so much of what's in the strategy. The 3 lines of effort is about lethality, increasing partnerships around the world, and then business reform in the Pentagon. What I want to focus on is actually the last one. And again, in my previous life in the Air Force, that's not what I would have done. I would have focused on the lethality part. But what is intriguing to me is not that the defense strategy talks about reform, but it's about the prominence of place it gives reform. It's not unusual to see reform language in a defense strategy, not at all. It is unusual, perhaps unprecedented, to see it to be one of the 3 major lines of effort. So what Secretary Mattis is saying is reforming the business practices of the Pentagon are as important to the security of the nation as increasing the readiness and the equipment that we carry. I think that's new ground, and I think that's a forcing function that Secretary Mattis is going to use.
So you when we talked about this, you asked me to check out the section starting
I told you
at
to go
page
read it.
10.
I told you to go read
So
it.
I did. I'm following orders. That's where the plan devotes considerable real estate to this reform you talk about. Delivering performance at the speed of relevance, organizing for innovation, driving budget discipline and affordability to achieve solvency, streamlining rapid iterative approaches from development to fielding, harnessing and protecting the national security innovation base. So let me ask you, are we finally going to get some, this is not the first time reform has been prominent, so are we finally going to get some traction reforming the department?
First of all, to your question, it's not the first time. Somewhere, I want to find it one day, somewhere on the Pentagon reservation is a boneyard of reform and change initiatives. Maybe it's in the courtyard. I don't know where it is, but this isn't the first time we've been to this rodeo. And if we don't do it this time, it won't be for lack of ambition. If you read that language, there's nothing that's off the table. We're talking about organizations and processes. That is fundamental to what we do. Now, the other thing that's in there was continue to reduce the management overhead in the headquarters staffs. Well, we just finished, or we're in the tail ends of an effort to reduce those staffs by 25%, and Secretary Mattis is saying we're going to continue to do that. So that's part of it. Part of it is the processes. Part of it is the organizations. The things that you read are the things we're trying to get after: the innovation, the agility, the discipline, the speed, and the department is not built for that. It says it in the strategy that we are built to minimize risk and not make mistakes, which is not how commercial industry orients itself. They're in a hurry to make mistakes so they can find the right answer. So it is a fundamental sea change, and it remains to be seen how we can do that. The challenge will be is typically in the building, and if you've lived through this in the Pentagon, in the military, the challenge will be is that we're in a hurry. Senior leaders are on the clock. They have limited time to achieve these things, and they want it done, and they want it done right now. And the old adage in the military is if you want something really, really bad, that's probably what you'll get. So do we have the patience and the stamina and the persistence to think through this in a deliberate fashion, to get after the processes, to get after organizations, to get after the people, the human capital? Grant Thornton, we call that operations transformation. It's a holistic look. And if you look at any one of these elements in a stovepipe, there's a pretty good chance you'll be underwhelmed by the result that you get. So if I'm encouraged, it's the effort to do it holistically. It's whether or not we'll have the patience and endurance and to get after the assistance required to do that holistically.
It'll take good people. And you talked about, and we don't have the same number of people at DOD in overhead or anywhere else that we've had in the past. And you've talked about a major reduction effort. Do we know how many people it'll take and what kind of people it'll take to get there?
No. I can tell you how many people it takes to run a fighter squadron. There are people that know exactly how many people it takes to run a tank company. I'm not sure we know how many people it takes to run a headquarters staff. And in many ways, the staff officer is the ultimate fireman. They just put out fires every day, and they go to where the problems are. And there is a sense that the staffs are bloated or at least overly large. And I agree with that. But I don't think there's scientific, analytical, underlying data that supports that and explains how and why. That's what we need. In industry, to go back to it, industry understands how to do human capital planning. Grant Thornton knows how to do human capital planning. The question is, before you start analyzing the human capital, you ask yourself, what do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? What's the outcome? And again, you're back to the holistic conversation. Anyone who has been part of an organizational reduction where it starts with an arbitrary number, 25%, 15%, whatever the number is, understands that drives people to all sorts of unhealthy behaviors. It's like playing musical chairs, but doing it on the Titanic. You're playing musical chairs, but they're rearranging the chairs while you're doing it. And that really frustrates people.
So you could just throw money at the problem, and it appears that the department's going to have all the money in the world. So we're done, right?
Assuming we get an appropriations this month, assuming.
You had to bring that up.
That's going to be a huge victory. But and it's a wonderful plus up. But I fear that inside that appropriation is a hidden pothole. And that is the sequestration with all of the disadvantages and the pain associated with sequestration. There was a laser focus on cutting costs, even imprudent cost cutting. But everyone was focused on getting a handle on cost because of sequestration. And there was pressure to do that. I wonder if we get the appropriations, will some of that pressure come off? And will some of that be relieved? And the saying that's out there, and I like it, and it's sort of unfair, the level of intellectual effort is inversely proportional to the dollars available. If you get more money, you think less. If you don't have dollars, you have to think more. That's unfair. It's overly broad, but there's a kernel of truth in it. And I wonder if Secretary Mattis's third line of effort is the lever to keep forcing us to do things better, more efficient, and faster. But hopefully we can do it. The men and women in the Pentagon, after suffering the staff reductions, in many ways, are shoveling coal every day just to keep the boilers lit. And they're working as hard and as fast as they can. And they lack the intellectual bandwidth to get after some of this. And intellectual bandwidth is what is required. And that's one of the reasons I came to Grant Thornton. As an individual consultant, you can't get after big problems. But going with a firm like Grant Thornton, You can bring a team of deep subject matter expertise to try to get after holistic problems. And all a senior leader in the Air Force is a problem solver. If you're not a commander and you're a staff officer, and I was a 2-star staff officer, you're a problem solver. And there's an opportunity here to keep solving problems.
Major General Paul Johnson, thanks for being here. Proud to work with you.
Thank you, Rob.